everybody, and welcome to another episode of Keep Pushing. Today, we are live on location at L'Arche Toronto in Toronto, and I have the privilege of interviewing the Director of Outreach for L'Arche Canada. John, welcome.
Thank you.
So, John, tell me a little bit about your experience with L'Arche as an organization, and actually how you started to know about L'Arche, and how did you come to L'Arche, really?
Great. Well, it was a while back. I came 33 years ago, having read Jean Vanier's book, Community and Growth, while I was at university. And that inspired me to, after university, I was looking for a place to do some service and get involved, and sought out L'Arche. In those days, we didn't have the internet, so I had to do some investigation to find L'Arche, and was told about L'Arche in Washington, D.C. And while there, they asked me to come up to Toronto because there was a bigger need here. And so I've become a L'Arche person, but also a Canadian, because they needed someone in L'Arche Toronto at the time. L'Arche Toronto was part of L'Arche Daybreak, which was the first community of L'Arche in Canada, and then later became a separate community of its own.
Fantastic. Okay. So tell me a little bit, I guess, about Vanier as a founder for L'Arche, what his vision and mission was for the organization, and what the organization really does. I know there's a lot there. What the organization really does within our community here in Toronto, for example.
Great. So Jean Vanier was actually teaching at university here in Toronto, at St. Michael's College at the University of Toronto in 1964. And he was a retired naval officer, professor of philosophy, and he was really searching for a place of belonging, a community that he could live his life and kind of his vocation. And his search led him through his spiritual director to meet people who were living in institutions for people with intellectual disabilities in France, where he had studied. And the encounters that he had with the men there in the institution really gave him the answer for this search. You know, that he felt called to just make a home and build community with some of the men he was meeting in the institutions in France. So from that very simple beginning in 1964 in France, they opened a very small home in a little village north of Paris called Trollibreuil. And the vision was originally just to live together. And Jean was someone who was very connected through his father and mother. His father was the Governor General of Canada at the time, Georges Vanier, and his mother, Pauline. And his parents were very involved in the church and in building community. And so there was a circle of people who knew him and knew his family. And he began talking about this experience of sharing life with these men with intellectual disabilities. Not only the suffering they had had because of the isolation they lived in the institution, but their incredible resilience. He personally was looking to discover his own sense of humor and being able to just kind of be at home and not so much in his head. And he discovered that in living with Raphael, Philippe, and the other men he lived with. And from the beginning, there was a circle of people around them. They were involved in a wider community as well. Jean began to speak about L'Arche, his experience throughout France and in Canada, where he was from. And the idea and the vision of L'Arche began to spread. And hundreds and hundreds of people actually heard for the first time about the life of people with intellectual disabilities. And many people were attracted to come and share that life. Canadians went to France, and some of those people came back to Canada and began L'Arche here. So in 1969, in Daybreak in Richmond Hill, Ontario, was founded by Stephen and Ann Newroth, who were Ontarians who went to Trolli and then came back and started L'Arche. From there, it began to spread around the world. So it opened the next year in 1970 in India. It was interfaith and multicultural from very early on. And it's gone to every continent. There's over 150 L'Arche communities around the world in 37 countries. 29 of them are in Canada, and we have 2 projects as well. So we're in 9 provinces across Canada now.
Great.
In each of the communities, there is some common elements. People share life together. often in homes where I lived for my first 10 years in large homes. I don't live in a home today, but I still belong to the community where I participated. We have an intentional community life of celebrations. We kind of celebrate everything in L'Arche. We welcome people to come live with us for a short time or a longer time. And we also participate in the wider community in a variety of ways. We belong, we're members of L'Arche, but we also belong to our local faith communities, or the Y, or schools, our workplaces.
Right.
And so we're part of a bigger network.
Absolutely.
Of our communities.
Absolutely.
So that we were part of the community living movement in the early years, very actively involved. And today I'd say we're part of the inclusion movement.
Right.
We want to, see that everyone has a valued place in their community, in their neighborhood, and are able to contribute their gifts and get the supports they need to do that well.
Fantastic. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, we are here on location in Toronto at L'Arche, their satellite in Toronto. I want to acknowledge the audience here as well. Wanted to do that. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being a part of today's episode. I want to ask, when I was doing research on your organization and going through your websites and all the material, you kind of briefly described everything that L'Arche is involved in. Can you kind of maybe pinpoint one or two key or unique things that L'Arche does for those with intellectual disabilities?
I think the key to L'Arche really is relationships. Where relationships, we use the word mutuality, which I don't think is very much used in our society, but I think it's very important. We take it for granted. I think if we enjoy relationships where each is giving and each receiving, and in my experience, many people with intellectual disabilities are never invited to contribute what they have. People see them as individuals who need supports, but don't look at them as individuals who might be artists, who might be family members who take care of family members, good friends who offer support to their friends when in need. And I've directly experienced that. From the beginning, when I first came to L'Arche, I was in relationships where I was being taught what I needed to learn by the members with disabilities, the members of my household. And I've discovered that those individuals have so much more to offer than I knew or that the society often looks for. Gifts and strengths and capabilities that are really needed. But it's through relationships where each of us is growing, each of us learning, each of us supporting the other when we need it. And then this idea of celebration, we really delight in the achievements of each member of the community. We delight in the ways in which people overcome their difficulties. We welcome some people from the institution as recently as the last decade who have a lot to overcome. They live lives of being isolated, undervalued, neglected, and sometimes abused. But once they get the support, where they're in relationships of trust, where they're valued, people flourish, and they have so much to offer. So our real challenge is how do we work with the wider community to shift a little bit and see people with disabilities in a new light as people who have something to offer, which everyone receives from when those gifts are valued.
Absolutely. If there is some message you would like to spread across Canada, because we're on YouTube, we're on Roku TV, so it's going across the world actually. For those out there who aren't necessarily connected to the disability community, either directly or indirectly, because you mentioned about, and I experienced this as a person with a disability, that often people misunderstand or don't give you the power you deserve, or the influence you deserve, because they assume, because you're disabled, that you don't have what it takes to do whatever it is. So to those folks who don't necessarily have that experience with people with disabilities, what is it that you would say to them in your time working with people with disabilities?
Well, I think that's the point exactly, is take the time to meet someone, to get to know that person as a person, to get past whatever fears you might have of, will I say the wrong thing, or will I do the wrong thing? The person who can tell you what the right thing is the person with the disability. They can guide you about how to support them and relate to them. People have all the skills we need to connect with other people, and they're no different than connecting with a person with a disability. It just might take a little bit of support to understand that individual's way of communicating. But if you welcome someone in friendship, if you welcome them to be a part of your organization, your local community, and really take the time just to get to know them, you'll discover very quickly, and they'll lead the way about how they can contribute, where they can be a friend. I mean, it's possible to have friendships over difference, without minimizing that we are different, but we're all different. So how to see that as a positive, that we can enriches our life rather than something that's just a challenge.
So as your role as Director of Outreach across Canada, so what is it that you see as a need for the people with disabilities within the community and outside of that community across Canada? What is it that you see that is of need?
I think the biggest need, in my experience, is that we work together more. I think there's just too many silos between people who are all really just busy with their own lives, trying to make, even within large, our local communities are very involved, but they're their life's very full. And how do we just share knowledge, come together to build more of a power base? Because in a sense, people with disabilities are one minority amongst many in our society, and often aren't coming together to amplify their voice and make change that's effective. And I think a large part of that isn't just political advocacy. It's also to work together to say we have something to offer. We can offer solutions, we're not just a problem, but bring us to the table. And I think it's hopeful that there's new accessibility legislation at the federal level. I think that's necessary. We have a United Nations Convention that we ought to really be promoting more and getting people involved, because it's a positive way of saying this is a group within our society that has something to offer, and we all need together to work together to make it happen.
Right. You mentioned the AODA at the federal level, but in terms of things at the provincial levels and municipal levels even, is there anything that can be done to enhance the lives of people with disabilities?
I think, again, for being an organization that's in 9 provinces, I think we're pretty aware and large of the great differences from province to province about legislation, but also about leadership. And I think you see that even more at the municipal level, or even at the school level. When leadership gets involved and says, we believe all of the members of our community deserve to have a valued place, and the supports that everybody should enjoy to be full participants, full citizens, then things happen. It has to be both grassroots and through the civic leaders. So there has to be real coming together of leadership. And I think the places, the communities, the provinces that have had more success in different areas, that knowledge needs to be shared, because it has been great success, but it's so, one place might be strong in one area and weak in another. A very encouraging aspect, I think, is that more and more business is taking its place too as another partner. It isn't simply government and civil society, also business is needed, because people are looking for valued employment. There's great issues of poverty. Housing is a major, major issue that we need to work together. People with disabilities are overwhelmingly amongst the poorest Canadians, and need access to employment, education, and housing as much as any community. And so, we need to all come together again, and we need to share the knowledge between jurisdictions.
Right. So if someone out there, whether it be an organization looking to help, or even an individual looking to help, where can they start?
That's a great question. I think that's sometimes the most daunting issue for people. But there are all of the organizations that support people with intellectual disabilities in Ontario, for example, are part of an organization together and share information. More and more we're creating websites to share knowledge and bring people together within the disabilities groups. So I would start there by identifying one organization in your local community and go there and ask for help finding what's right for you.
Sure.
People's needs and what they're interested in vary. And it can be daunting to find the right connection. I think more and more places like the WISE become hubs of information too. But the strongest one today, I would say, is online, to find where, as a first step to meeting some people who might then help you. My experience is people are really willing to help and support people to find the right answer, but you've got to take that first step to meet them.
Absolutely. So where can people find you if they want to get a hold of you?
L'Arche Canada is at l'archecanada.ca with no apostrophe, all one word, and L'Arche International at l'arche.org. And each of you'd find on the L'Arche Canada site the name of and websites of our local communities across Canada.
Fantastic. And hey, everybody, you can find me on Facebook, my Facebook page, Keep Pushing TV show. Once again, this has been Keep Pushing. My name is Sujit K. Reddy. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.